Hi all and welcome to today's Virtual Arena. Joining me is Duncan Coleman, the founder of the company Onebanks. So thank you so much for joining us here, Duncan. With that in mind, could you give us a brief intro about yourself and really, what led to the creation of Onebanks?
Thanks for having me this morning, Doug. As you said, my name's Duncan Coleman, the founder and CEO of Onebanks. I worked at KPMG prior to starting Onebanks, and during that time I actually went away to California and did some coding. I learned how to code in Java, albeit just breaking the surface, but it got me really interested in open banking and the opportunities that open banking can facilitate. And I suppose that's really where Onebanks stemmed from, is learning more about open banking, not just from a technological perspective, but also from a conceptual perspective. Understanding what open banking is trying to achieve is trying to bring different banks' data to a third party. It's trying to help people manage their finance. It's trying to make people's lives simpler and try to increase competition in banking and really just to improve the lives of people. But the one sticking point in my head was always the fact that, well, it's still not helping everybody. And that's what Onebanks is trying to achieve, is trying to make open banking available to everybody, even people who aren't online. And one key part of Onebanks and what we're trying to achieve is to try to help people get online and get on the journey and try to make the most of these new innovations. So it's that, and then also coming back to Scotland, where I'm from, just realising how many bank branches are closing. I remember back in November, I read a statistic about the number of banks that have been closing in Scotland. It was more than 2/3 in the last 5 years. And
2/3?
Just
wow.
From a personal perspective, like my bank close to me has closed down, and I now need to travel a lot further to access my retail bank branch. And although I personally don't go to bank branches that often, I know a lot of people who do, whether it's my gran, even my dad likes to do his banking in person, just for that trust element. So I think those two sort of understanding open banking conceptually, and then also understanding the scale of the problem is where Onebanks came from. And just to be clear, it was just an idea a long time ago, and it's moved along substantially since that initial idea, and just getting more and more people involved and more people adding really useful insights has really shaped the proposition today.
Incredible. I mean, it's when you gave me that statistic, that is insane, and it's something that no one's talking about. How frustrating that must be for the people that are left behind from open banking. But with that in mind, I think what we need to actually tackle is really what Onebanks is. We've heard the kind of story behind it. We've heard now what you're trying to help. How does Onebanks stop open banking from leaving people behind?
So what we've done is we've tried to think about, why do people visit a retail bank branch, and we've tried to capture the essence of a retail bank branch, and we've taken that into 3 different user experiences. So we've built the kiosk with 3 different experiences in mind. Experience 1 being human interaction, educational, and I think that's key to not leaving anybody behind. Everybody likes innovation. Everybody can get behind innovation. It's just trying to ensure that people can get on board with it. And I think a key element of that is having people helping people. That educational experience is focused on a member of the Onebank staff sitting down with a user who comes in and trying to help them get signed up to online banking, help teach them about the different technological advancements that are available, whether it's open banking, whether it's just online banking, and have that human support where necessary. And then there's experience 2, which is over the counter. So we can facilitate cash deposits, cash withdrawals, payments, transfers, and just provide users with an oversight across all of their different bank accounts. And then we've got experience 3, which is it's tailored mainly to SMEs and their needs, but it's a self-service cash deposit and cash withdrawal, ATM. So we've captured all of that into our Onebanks kiosk.
That's incredible. It's effectively a bank in a kiosk, which just sounds absolutely amazing. And it's almost mind-boggling. You almost feel like it should have happened before, but you guys have just captured that lightning in a bottle. I think it's so brilliant. Now, to me, Onebanks also really does kind of typify the concept of open banking. is it true that you're completely bank agnostic?
Yes, absolutely. We're working with all of the banks. Our main objective is to try and help the banks help their customers. And it comes back to the core purpose and the values of Onebanks. What we're trying to do is we're trying to drive financial inclusion. So therefore, being completely bank agnostic is pivotal as part of our brand. So yes, we can facilitate all banks, all customers, all demographics. And we are, so completely bank agnostic, which is exactly, as I said, it's part of what open banking is trying to achieve.
Yeah. I mean, open banking was meant to help everyone, and it was that whole coming togetherness of banking. So it's brilliant that you guys are kind of almost typifying the physical aspect of open banking when people so much, consider it such a purely digital innovation. It's so good to see that, the physical world isn't being left behind. And speaking of that kind of physical world, and when a lot of people are being digital now, a lot of people are actually working from home now. Which we've seen numerous actual evidences that suddenly small businesses are actually going to do all right because the high street is coming back, is resurging, it's coming back to life. So I mean, I've heard that you obviously have a kiosk. Where is it that a Onebanks kiosk would actually operate from?
So Onebanks kiosk will be in convenient locations, whether it's a supermarket, a train station. It's going to be dependent on the town or community that we locate ourselves.
Sure.
So we're not going to say we're going to be in a supermarket, because wherever the focal point of a community is, that's where we'll try and locate ourselves. A supermarket, for example, is a great example of a perfect location for Onebanks, especially in the back of COVID, because people don't want to travel unnecessary distances. However, everybody still needs to do their weekly shop, and therefore, if we were able to have a Onebanks kiosk in supermarkets all across the UK, that would be a really good opportunity, I think.
Excellent. And one interesting thing also, we've talked about the kind of you can deposit money and everything like that, but a lot of people want to go to their bank to conduct the more complex matters of financial services. Will your Onebanks kiosk actually be able to help people in this regard, talk them through it, as well as the more kind of robust day-to-day activities they might need from a retail bank branch?
So not yet. We're focusing on what the main problem in society today, which is access to cash. And we'll look to expand our service offering and work closely with the banks to do that. However, for today, we're focusing on, as I said, the main problem in society, which is access to cash, and trying to establish our presence.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, obviously, because we've heard a lot of people are being left behind, but going into the future, how critical is access to cash for the UK? I mean, I've actually even started to see, and I don't know if this is just because of COVID-19, I've started to see a lot of places that say they're card only.
Yeah, so I think a large part of that is due to COVID-19. There was an access to cash review. It was a report that was issued in March 2019, which highlighted all of the issues that the UK might see if they were to, I think the quote was, sleepwalk into a cashless society. Yeah. And their research showed that there was around 17% of the UK population, which is more than 8 million people, who would struggle to live in a cashless society. So I don't think it's a case of do we move cashless or not. I think it's a case of we need to maintain the option for people, the choice, and we need to ensure that nobody's left behind on the shift towards a digital society. And that's what Onebanks is trying to achieve. We're trying to bridge that gap between where banking is today and that inevitable shift towards a cashless future.
That's interesting, and it's going to be a really interesting battle to kind of keep that balance. But I guess, in the meantime, as you said, that kind of battle to kind of make cash still available to those who critically need it. Would you say it's true that, with adoption rates to digital payments going up and the access to cash going down, that actually means that cash is actually way more important because those 8 million people suddenly don't have access to it?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with what you've just said. I think with the increase in digital and the decrease in cash, it's resulting in bank branches closing down, and it's really highlighting the extent of the problem in all over the UK. And I think that's only going to increase is going to accelerate the commercial decisions from the banks, and therefore a solution like Onebanks is more timely than ever to ensure that those 8 million people don't get left behind. I think also COVID, with the increase in digital adoption, I think it's highlighted how susceptible the vulnerable people in society are to a pandemic, and therefore I think a Onebank solution will really help ensure that we can cater for their needs and everybody's needs.
Definitely.
And yeah, it's always good having cash is king. It's always good having cash to fall back on if everything else fails. So it's important to keep cash in society.
Exactly, and I always thought that with open banking, one of the biggest mantras I always heard was it was effectively going to increase choice and customer choice when it comes to financial services. So it's interesting to hear that it's actually caused 8 million people to lose choice. I mean, that's no small amount of people in the UK. But yeah, going back to cash as a whole, do you think, we've touched on it slightly, but we've seen ATM usage go down, but that could also be because there's less ATMs, as you said, the branches are shutting down. But do you think cash is going to have a big bounce back, or at least go some way to coming back to becoming the king again if the pandemic winds down?
Yeah, so absolutely. Most cash transactions are spontaneous. Yeah. And as you said, a lot of retailers are not accepting cash at the time being because cash is considered to be dirty. However, that is not the case, and as we move out of the pandemic, cash will start increasing again. Recent statistics have showed that it's already bouncing back, and cash transactions are increasing at a substantial rate. Just going back to your previous point about open banking increasing customer choice, I think it is still increasing customer choice. Absolutely, I think it is still increasing transparency. I think that's crucial. Going
back to Onebanks a bit. How have high street banks taken to your concept? Do they see you as this kind of competitor on the block, or do they actually see you as a way to help their customers out, and there's no competition within that?
So to make it very clear, Onebanks is not a bank. Our purpose is to work alongside the banks and to help the banks help their customers. We're not offering any services that the banks don't already offer. We're just enabling the bank's customers access to their bank by providing that physical presence. Yeah. So the banks have taken really well to the Onebank solution. They've been closing their bank branches, and Onebanks provides them an opportunity to still facilitate and still serve their full customer base all across the UK, whether it's places that they're closing down or whether it's places that they haven't been able to have a physical presence. So I think they see the benefit in Onebanks and the fact that we are there to actually support them in the transition towards a cashless future.
Yeah, I can imagine. And with that, then I've got to ask actually what the business model is. Do the banks realize that if they're going to lose their giant kind of branding presence that a branch once provided, is having participating in a Onebanks kiosk in a town centre actually a good way for them to kind of maintain that brand presence? Is that where the business model comes from? How does Onebanks keep going?
So yeah, it's a means for the banks to maintain their physical presence. Although it's not a brick and mortar single bank, it enables them to facilitate their customers still going forward. And Onebanks, although as I said, we're very focused on access to cash and at the moment, we'll always look to work closely with the banks. So the banks will keep on innovating, keep on introducing new technologies, and Onebanks will always be there to support the banks and help ensure that their full customer base can benefit from that latest technology.
Excellent. And do you gain access to any of the customers' data? Because being that kind of aggregate between all these different financial institutions, if you did get access to that data, it would be as part of open banking would almost effectively allow. I mean, your data banks would be incredibly rich and surely help so many of the banks get richer data on their own customers.
So yeah, as part of open banking, there is a consent model whereby Onebanks will have to gain access to the individual's account information, but we only do that to then help the customer by showing them, well, here's your information across a number of different banks. So the data that we get, we make it very clear why we get the information and what we're using the information for. And the bottom line is we use that information to help the customer. We're not a competitive bank, as I said. We're not using the data to do anything fancy. We're just using the data to help the customer.
Brilliant. Yeah, nice. And
it's interesting, just quickly as well, sorry to jump across you, but I think what one of the unique things about Onebanks is with having access to a number of different banks. So from an individual perspective, an individual might have 5 different bank accounts, and what's unique about Onebanks, there's a lot of things that's unique about Onebanks, but one of the things is having that oversight across a number of different accounts allows us to, for example, perform anti-money laundering checks, which is far superior to the current banks, because the banks at the moment only have oversight of their individual customer base and they can't have oversight across different banks. Whereas what Onebanks can do is have that oversight across from a customer perspective across a number of different banks. So it's a really unique point. That
I think that's kind of what I was getting at, is the fact that Onebank seems to be in the perfect position to not only typify open banking in a physical space, but also with all that data being aggregated across numerous different things. I was like, that's what I was interested in. Surely that must open up so many more, not just revenue streams, but innovation streams for financial services to go in the future. So AML, that sounds incredible, especially now that, as we've mentioned, digital payments are becoming more of a thing and cross-border. You've got to be, a lot of banks have got to be very, thankful to hear that you can provide that extra security layer, I'm guessing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think bottom line is we are there to support the banks as much as we can. We're not going to be doing the innovating as such. We're going to just be providing the access for the customers. I think a core part of Onebanks going forward is going to be that the human interaction. Because I think if there's one thing COVID-19's taught us, is that people need people. And I think by having that physical presence and that human interaction, it's a great way for banks to still communicate with their customers and still ensure that they're all still engaged.
Excellent. And with that in mind, what is the future of Onebanks, and where can our viewers find out more?
So the future of Onebanks, that's a really good question, and I suppose
crystal ball time.
Yeah, exactly. I've got a lot of different ideas as to where Onebanks can go, but ultimately we've got a core focus. Our core focus is helping customers. We're never going to charge customers. We're trying to make banking more human again. So no matter what avenue we go on, human interaction and that physical presence in conjunction with the technology, that's always going to be the core of our business, is trying to maintain that sort of bridge between fintech, the latest fintech, and having that physical presence. Where viewers can find out more on our website, so onebanks.co.uk. We've got a lot of information on the website, and we're introducing our newsletter, which is coming out shortly, so users can subscribe. So if you keep an eye on the website, and we're also looking to do some press releases with some exciting information coming out shortly. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, I'll make sure to keep my ear to the ground and eyes peeled. But can I actually ask up a follow-up question about the kind of the collaboration nature that obviously Onebanks typifies? We've talked very much about how you're collaborating with a lot of the banks, but also I imagine there's a lot of room and a lot of scope to collaborate with a lot of fintechs in the UK as well. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. And as I said, I think it was the first question, I had an idea. That idea has been changed significantly from the initial stages, and it was part of the team. So the team, we've got a great team behind us. We've got a chairman who lives in Miami. We've got a COO who was a senior manager at Santander, as well as Leslie Ann, who is one of the creators of M-Pesa. So we've got a really experienced team who have helped shape the proposition, and also fintechs. So that collaboration throughout the journey with other fintechs has really helped shape what Onebanks is today. We actually started, we had office space down in level 39 in London, which is a shared working space specifically for fintechs. And that was a really good way to meet other like-minded companies. And I really am passionate about fintechs helping other fintechs, because there's so many different opportunities that just having that awareness of what other companies are doing can help Onebanks, a young company. So
Definitely, and just create that ecosystem that open banking has promised for the last couple of years. Well, Duncan, thank you so much for your insight, and I think it's such a brilliant project, and it's such a brilliant idea. So thank you for sharing it with us today.
No, thank you very much for your time.
Excellent. Well, and to all our viewers, as Duncan said, you can make sure to check out their website to find out more, and obviously the e-blast, the news blast that's coming out soon. And to all our other viewers, thank you very much for watching as well. You can catch the rest of the series over at www.fintechf.com, and of course LinkedIn and YouTube. So I look forward to seeing you next time. See ya.